Welcome to Design 30. My name is Jason Bilyeu, and in this podcast, I provide design strategies and tools to improve creativity, innovation, and overall design confidence. I'm back, and it feels great to be back. It was an awesome trip. For those who don't know, I just got back from my honeymoon, a delayed honeymoon, in the Canary Islands, which are this, I didn't know, but they are this chain of islands off the coast of Morocco, and they're absolutely beautiful, formed by volcanoes, nearly perfect weather, like all year round, just because of where they're situated. You're almost always in that 70 to 80 degree weather, and it's just beautiful place. Some really, really cool landscapes. You have everything from a volcano you can hike to these mountains that are basically straight up and straight down. And some of them have this lush, green, beautiful trees. And other ones are a little bit more drier with these incredible rock formations and then beautiful beaches. And yeah, all of these different things. It was absolutely incredible. It was a vacation, but also it was an adventure. Some parts of it were definitely a little bit stressful. Anytime I feel like you go to a different country, there's always all these different things that you learn and you have to pick up, and you have to kind of get used to how things are done there. For example, I really underestimated driving in a different country. They are still on the same side of the road as the US, but different signs that you have to follow and just understanding how things work, and a lot of one-ways and little symbols on the roads that I didn't quite understand right away. And then it was also driving a manual vehicle, which I know how to drive, but I haven't driven one in years. And so I was thrown right into driving a manual on these somewhat sketchy, small island roads and really steep. It seemed like everything there was on a hill. We were on the island of Tenerife, if you're familiar with the Canary Islands. So that was a bit of an adventure for sure. But for the most part, the trip went really well. Had a ton of fun. It was great to disconnect for almost 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks. So I haven't been on here. I've been releasing a lot of these rewind episodes, which I hope you all enjoyed and were able to go back and listen to, or at least listen to pre-recorded older episodes and get a little bit from that. Maybe got you interested in going back and listening through a lot of the older episodes, which that's one of my goals with this podcast, is to create content that's not something you have to listen to like right away or that week. It's something that is still interesting in a year or 2 years or 3 years. It's information that's going to be beneficial for a long time. So whenever you have the opportunity, whenever you have time to go back and listen to them, it's all still there. It's still good information, good design strategies and tools and all of those things. So yeah, I haven't been on here for a while, but I had a lot of time to think. And even on this vacation, I feel like I had a lot of fun and interesting thoughts about design and some insights that I'm excited to share in different ways on this podcast and on other platforms, Twitter, Instagram. There's definitely some photos, things like that I'm going to be sharing and doing, little mini design reviews, stuff like that. Just kind of giving some design feedback on these different things that I noticed while I was traveling. So all of that is coming down the line. I'm also hoping to be doing a few more episodes, a little bit more podcast content per week. I've done it every now and then. You'll see there'll be an extra podcast during the week. I would really like to make that more of a constant thing, where there's always going to be a podcast out on Monday, but then also a second podcast potentially on Friday, maybe Wednesday. If you guys have a day you like better, feel free to let me know. But yeah, so excited to dive back into this, dive back into the world of design, back into work, all of these different things. There's nothing, I don't know, I feel like there's nothing quite like a long vacation to make you appreciate kind of the routines in your life. And I'm someone who loves routines and kind of needs that sort of thing. So I'm actually excited to get back in a routine with getting up early, working and then going to the gym and maybe doing a little bit more reading, things like that at night. I love kind of getting into those routines. So part of me is excited to be back, and I love the vacation, but at the same time, it's also fun to be back here and working on new cool things. So for today, I'm going to keep this episode a little bit short. It was just kind of an I'm back, a welcome back episode. But there was one concept that I do want to share, one thing that I read in this book, which I'm sure you've heard of. You've definitely heard of the person. It's Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. So the new biography that just came out, 3.5 weeks ago, something like that. And it's pretty incredible. I mean, we all know kind of the general aspects of what Elon Musk has done and what he's accomplished, but man, this book just really goes into detail. And as a designer, there's a ton of just little gold nuggets packed into all over this book. So I can't recommend that aspect of it enough. I'm not quite done. My hope was to finish it on the plane ride back, which it was like a 40-hour travel day. Well, 40-hour, almost 2 days of travel to get back to the U.S. from the Canary Islands, which was a little rough, but we made it. And I got a lot of time to read this book. So I'm not quite done though. I think I got through about 400 and some pages, still got 150 or so to go. But there's just been so many little nuggets that I'm excited to pull out of this book. I'll probably do an episode in the future focusing on this book in particular and just, doing one of my book reviews. But for now, there's one line that it really kind of hit me while I was on the plane reading this book. And this is in reference to each chapter usually talks about kind of a different story from a different company. And so this one's talking about Tesla and talking about some of the principles, ideas, goals behind how they did things at Tesla. And so this quote is actually from one of the designers who worked with Elon Musk at Tesla named von Holzenhausen. And he said the vision was that we would create designers who thought like engineers and engineers who thought like designers. And this really hit home with me because in a lot of ways, I've never worded it quite this way, but that's a big part of what I want and what I'm hoping the Design 30 podcast and Design 30 in general is. It's this way for me as an engineer to learn more about design and then share these ideas and concepts about design with other people. And then it's a way for me, I also consider myself to be a designer. I think, that's one of my goals is to be this engineer who thinks like a designer. So it's a way for engineers to listen to this podcast as well and learn more about design and these different concepts and principles that you're often not exposed to in a lot of different engineering classes or in school or maybe even in companies. You're focused on a lot of the engineering details, which are all super important, but you don't always get the opportunity to work with designers, to work with your industrial designers at work. And so what Elon Musk did at Tesla is he actually put the designers next to the engineers and the engineers next to the designers. A little bit earlier on this page, he says, or the author says, it was an example of Musk's policy that the designers sketching the shape of the car should work hand in glove with the engineers who were determining how the car would be built. So you're setting up this scenario where you have this just automatic communication between your engineers and between your designers because you're literally right next to each other. And the designers are coming up with things that the engineers then have to actually figure out how are they going to manufacture it? What materials are they going to make it out of? How is it going to be formed? And then they don't talk about it in this specific section, but later on in the book, they talk about how Elon Musk will often then, once things are being manufactured, put the engineers right next to production. And so they're right there for production to give feedback. They're hearing what the problems are. They're hearing what's difficult, hearing what's taking more time to assemble, what's expensive, what parts are difficult to source. So there's this whole idea of co-location to help engineers, to help each person in the company understand how their work is impacting other people and what they can do to improve it, which overall is going to make your company more efficient, and it's going to help people understand what they can do to help the other people on the team succeed. So if you have one person in the company who's slowing everything down, who doesn't understand how their parts are being used or how they're being assembled, that can cause a lot of problems. That can cause a lot of inefficiencies, which is something I'll probably talk about more in the future. But Elon Musk is he's a very big fan of finding those kind of weak links, and he has no problem getting rid of them, which has often been something he's been criticized for. He's willing to, if you're not living up to what he thinks is good enough for the team, he'll literally just fire you on the spot, which that could be a bit harsh. But at the same time, when you think about it from a company standpoint, that one person could be causing problems that are slowing down the overall efficiency and productivity of the entire company. So to help the entire team perform better, he's willing to cut bait with these people who aren't living up to the standard, which is a really high standard, but not living up quite to the standard that he's set or the standard that he sees. So it's really, really interesting. These are kind of the things that I think this book brings up for people to think about and wrestle with, and think about, if you own a company potentially, how are you going to implement these sorts of policies, and how are you going to handle people who maybe aren't performing well enough? How are you going to push people and inspire people? I think all of these things you can take little nuggets from this book about. But going back to this quote that I started this whole little section about, was the vision was that we would create designers who thought like engineers and engineers who thought like designers. So that's something that I want to embody on this podcast. And I really want to be able to provide some engineering perspective for designers who listen to this. And then I also really want to provide some design perspective to engineers who listen to this. And I think both of those, if you're a designer who can think like an engineer, you're going to be so much more successful. And if you're an engineer who can think like a designer, you're also going to be that much more successful and that much more valuable to your company. And that means your career most likely is going to be that much more successful. So that was one thing that it really hit home with me from this book. Like I said, there's so much more. I'm going to be sharing tidbits here and there for a long time, and probably doing an entire episode just really diving into a lot of the details of the book, a lot of different stories and takeaways from an engineering and a design perspective. So that's where I'm going to leave this episode for today. It's awesome to be back. I'm really excited to keep working on episodes and keep putting content out there. I love interacting with people. If you want to reach out on Learn Design 30, I got all sorts of stuff, right? Twitter, Instagram, you can find Design 30. On Twitter, you should be able to look up Design 30 or also just Jason Bilyeu, either way. You can also shoot me an email, learndesign30@gmail.com. That's a great way to get in touch. So don't hesitate to reach out. Love that. Looking forward to getting back into things and continuing to build this fun little design community that Design 30 has already created. And that's all I've got. So as always, have a great week, everybody. And remember, design more, despair less. Thanks for listening.